Good morning, everybody. Good morning. We're going to go ahead and get started. It is incredible to see so many people here this morning, bright and early, and I hope all of you have had an opportunity to have a little bit of breakfast too. We have an action-packed agenda this morning, and it is just a pleasure to see so many people here. To bring everybody up to speed and kind of set the stage a little bit, I wanted to give a little bit of information about the origins of this and what we're doing. But the St. Petersburg Foundation, Pinellas Community Foundation, and then USF as well have partnered together to do an assessment of our nonprofit community. This is building on the work from a number of years ago by the Foundation for a Healthy St. Petersburg. And I wanted to tell you a little bit about the people some of the people that will be here today, and our organizations really are all of our commitment to this work. At Pinellas Community Foundation, we've been supporting nonprofits, and that's been the core of what we have done for over 54 years in the community. We hear daily from organizations about the work that they do, their needs, their challenges, but in this effort coming together, we thought it appropriate, and hearing from our partners at St. Petersburg Foundation, the need to sort of pause and officially do an assessment of what is going on within our local nonprofit sector. My career has been in leading nonprofit organizations, and I've been proud to do that in Tampa Bay for 20 years. My name is Duggan Cooley. I'm the CEO of the Pinellas Community Foundation. Also involved in this effort and really kind of working with us to make sure that we got involved in this effort is the St. Petersburg Foundation, and they have been involved in working to build nonprofit sector capacity, and they care deeply about learning and self-knowledge and the things that we can get and the data-driven insights that we can get to help support the nonprofit sector. And representing that organization, I'll talk a little bit more about Karen Chasen a little bit later as we introduce her and the parts of our assessment that she's going to talk about this morning. I also want to recognize Professor Phil Trocchia this morning. He will be, you will see his passion on display as he talks about the methodology of the survey and that work. But from the USF Muma College of Business and their Customer Experience Laboratory, he is passionate about this work as well. I'd like to talk also about Joe Hamilton, who will be our MC today, and you probably know Joe best as the publisher of the St. Pete Catalyst and the soon-to-be-launched Cityverse. But at the essence of the Catalyst is an effort to aggregate and curate sparks that propel our community and nonprofit content, and the work of our nonprofit sector is an important part of that. And it's exciting to see Joe's entrepreneurial passion for our nonprofit world, and he will be our MC today. So I'd like to welcome Joe, and thank you for your involvement as well.
Good morning. You all look wonderful. So I attended the first nonprofit survey event that the Foundation for Healthy St. Petersburg did approximately 5 years ago, and they had a room filled maybe even a little bigger than this, and it was a really impressive event. It was at a hotel in Carillon, and this is before the St. Petersburg Foundation was really even a concept. And what I remember being moved by came because I was interested in the data, and the data was indeed interesting. But what moved me was the community, that this room was filled with people in a sector who were coming together, trying to get energies to match and trying to get, to be together and figure out what they could do with this data. And as we fast forward to now, a lot of the parameters and the frameworks are the same. As nonprofits are businesses, we do struggle for the same resources, we do compete for the same talent, and there is all the trappings or competition of a business. But what's unique about the nonprofit sector is that we have, deeper than our competition is our commitment to making our community better. That's the reason why you'll see in some of these stats that we're willing to work for less money than we could get in other sectors. And so it's important to keep that mindset, because while we do feel like resources are scarce, what we have here in this group is really an abundance of resources in the ways we can collaborate with each other, in the ways we can share services, in the ways we can teach each other best practices, which ultimately help us free up our resources so that we don't have to earn them and compete for them on this end when we can save them and share them on the other end, and end up in the same place. So I hope you'll take that mindset into your gathering today and talk to each other about how we can work together, share services, collaborate, share best practices, and do things of that nature, because it's all right here in the room. And with that, I will introduce someone who has been a longtime supporter of nonprofits in a very official capacity as Commissioner and Mayor, our Mayor Welch.
Good morning. How's everyone doing? It is so great to be here. I've seen so many familiar faces. Joe, thank you for the quick introduction. I like that. I want to thank the St. Pete Foundation, the Center for Health Equity, Madam CEO. Always great to see you again. And as Joe said, in my 21 months as mayor and 20 years as a commissioner, I've gotten to know a lot of folks in this room. And I want to thank you all for your leadership. And as I'm looking around the room and I'm seeing folks that I haven't had a chance to talk to in a few months, I think about the services that you all help provide. I saw Michael Gelazzo, who worked on returning citizen services, and folks that we worked on housing issues and youth and education issues, mental health issues. We led the way working with nonprofits on homelessness back in 2006 with the Homeless Leadership Network. And that is an enduring system of services that endures to this day with Pinellas Hope and Safe Harbor and funding from multiple cities in the county to address homelessness. And so many great things have happened through our collaboration with nonprofits. And I want to thank you for all the work you do to provide hope and uplift and opportunity for thousands of residents across our community, and really setting a standard that other communities actively want to replicate. Now, I know many of you have dedicated your lives to this work, and as Joe said, no one works in nonprofits for the big salaries or the notoriety, but you're here because you have what I call the DNA of community service and servant leadership, and I want to commend you for the work that you do every day to provide support for those in our community who need it the most. And at the same time, it's becoming more complex to run a nonprofit, just as complex as a for-profit business. And I understand the assessment that we will hear about later today will focus on collaboration, growth, and sustainability, among other topics. And my hope is, data makes a difference, informed decision-making makes a difference, but also connections and partnerships make a big difference. And if we can all work together, I think we can make a better impact and a more lasting impact on all of our communities. I probably shouldn't go off script, but I'm going to go off script. I'm sorry, my managing director of communications is here. I'm going off script, Eliza. So I was having a couple conversations with folks who I won't name here that have worked long and hard in our community. We're just talking about what's going on in our country. And they were kind of saying, are you going to go for a different office? I'm like, no, because here at the local level, we can focus on impact. And that's what we've been able to do in St. Petersburg and Pinellas County, focus on, is it better to have a mental health program that doesn't arrest people? And that's why under CEO Tomlin's leadership on the city, they created the CALL program, where in most cases, instead of a police officer going to an issue of mental health or homelessness or a kid that's not going to school, we send out a social worker. And that's been so successful. And it checks all the boxes. I don't care if you're a fiscal conservative, I don't care if you're a far left person, it's cheaper, right? You're not arresting the person. That law enforcement officer is not being tied up to deal with a situation they're really not capable of solving or resolving. That's just one example of what we've done by working together and focusing on issues and not getting involved in the crazy partisanship. And the nonprofits have been a big part of that, because y'all are the subject matter experts and y'all deliver the services. So I just wanted to say thank you. I don't know why I went off script, but I wanted to say it. So So for the city, we have these pillars for progress, and neighborhood health and safety is one of those. Education and youth opportunities is another one, and equitable development is another one of those pillars. And when you think about the work that you all do, it all aligns and supports those pillars. The city's impact and the impact of all of your work as nonprofits is at its greatest when we work together. And that really means listening to each other, understanding our respective and collective vision, goals, and challenges. And so when the United Way and St. Pete Free Clinic or Feeding Tampa Bay speak about the ALICE income threshold, what I've heard about a lot and have learned about it, we're listening and learning. When CASA talks to us about the support needed for those dealing with domestic violence at home or in the workplace, we are listening. And when the Phyllis Wheatley Rise to Read program reminds us that support is needed for young people who need to improve their reading levels as a gateway to success, we're listening. And in this case, the city is funding that at $250,000 for this fiscal year. I'd like to end with this quote, and it says, quote, "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed individuals can change the world. In fact, it is the only thing that ever has," end quote. When cultural anthropologist Margaret Mead made that statement, I know that she was talking about the same kind of folks that we have in this room today. You all are making a difference, changing lives and fueling progress for families, individuals across our community. I want to thank you all for your leadership, and I hope you have a great conference. Thank you all.
I'd like to officially invite the mayor to a baseball game in 2040. They're going to be here, so. So we get a lot of news, obviously in the Catalyst, I get a lot of news that comes across my desk of people changing jobs, things coming, things going, and very rarely do I literally say, yes, yes. And when I got the news that Dr. Tomlin got the job as president and CEO of the Foundation for Health of St. Petersburg, I gave a yes, because I'm so happy that we have this person in this role at this time, Dr. Tomlin.
Good morning. Thank you, Joe. That's so nice. Such a nice way to start the day. So happy to see all of you here today. You've heard a welcome from a few important people and important voices, but I am so privileged and pleased to say welcome, as this is our space. And we are so happy that you are here, because we hope that you will also consider it your space as well. Want to acknowledge Karen Chasson, who was once a member of the Foundation for a Healthy St. Pete family and led this important work when she was here with us, once a member of our family, forever a member. Thank you for your leadership and vision in our community. And thank you, Mayor, for your insightful words and your leadership in everything that you're doing about in the work that we are going to discuss today. You talked about your pillars. There are 5 of them, and we work with the Foundation for a Healthy St. Pete as informed by 5 social determinants of health. And you'll see that they are almost completely overlaid. And the same is true for so many of us in the work that we are doing, those of us who gather in this space, which tell us that we're on the same page, and we should be able to completely write a next chapter for our community with confidence that we will have inclusive prosperity and a city that works for all of us. So we are so happy to be the place of convening for this very important work. And today we're going to dig into the rich data to which so many of us have contributed, those in this room and others. At the Foundation, data is critical to our work, and people are at the heart of everything we do. Data ensures that we steward our resources wisely so that we may engage as effectively as possible on behalf of the people that we are honored to serve. And this is in keeping with our calling and our mission. This morning's meeting is an example of our important work toward transformational partnerships that answer the call of our community-driven mission, compassion, and care. Several years ago, the Foundation produced the inaugural not-for-profit assessment survey, which was the predecessor to this work, in partnership with the Nonprofit Leadership Center. We drew on feedback and survey responses from many of the people in this room today. We used that survey and the rich data that it produced to better understand our community's needs and to discover opportunities to strengthen our work and our collective impact. As the mayor said, it's all about impact. As a funder, if we can better understand the landscape of service providers in our community, we can better understand the investments and support that are most needed. We're working very hard to get it right. We can also better understand our opportunities to collaborate, leverage our assets and resources, and elevate our impact in our community as we move meaningfully toward our shared goals. So again, as an organization that's committed to data-informed decisions at the core of everything we do, we're so grateful for the opportunity to support today's event by hosting it here in the Foundation's Center for Health Equity. The Center for Health Equity is one of 3 ways that we work to make an impact in our community. We also work through strategic initiatives as well as grant making. And we hope that this is one of many interactions that we have as we continue to build a stronger, healthier, more equitable community. Again, thank you so much for being here, and we can't wait to see you back again.
All right. We are tantalizingly close to the meaty data you came for. We have 2 moments of appreciation left. One is for this beautiful space and the land that is on, and to tell us a little more about that, the leader of the center, Marcus Brooks.
Good morning. So I will be short but intentional with my remarks. I want to make sure that we are paying honor and homage to the original custodians of the land here that we share, the Miccosukee, Tocobaga, and Seminole tribes. I also want to bring acknowledgement to the purpose of this space that Dr. Tomlin just brought forward and the original intent and design for this building being a once segregated grocery store. It's really intentional that we do the work that we do because we must forward this mission given its origin, right? And so we're intentional in doing so. We're truly grateful to have Dr. Tomlin as our leader. I have the privilege of working with a phenomenal team here. But again, as you were in this space, bringing yourselves forward, don't forget where it started and where we're heading. Thank you.
All right. And our last moment of appreciation before we get into the data one that is near and dear to my heart. If any of you have ever worked with entrepreneurs, Irv and I are rambunctious. We are driven, occasionally bulls in china shops. I know there's a lot of words. And when we decided to, embark and work and turn some of that entrepreneurial spirit into the nonprofit space, we really needed to bring someone that could help us not be dumb and help us not make mistakes and be measured in what we do and to direct our energy. And it was no small task to do that, and to find someone who could have their pick of jobs, who've come had a pedigree of huge nonprofits in their background, including this one, and who had done amazing things, decide to say, you know what, at this point in my career when I could be in a nice big fat corner office, I'm going to get scrappy with a startup nonprofit. Karen Chaston did that, and we wouldn't be where we are today without her, and we wouldn't be here today without her. So thank you so much, Karen. Much appreciated. And she wrote what I'm about to read you, so there you go. All right, so now it's time for the good stuff. So we're gathering today to take a look at the state of nonprofits. It's important to take a step back and look at the statewide picture and how the nonprofit sector measures up against other major employers and economic drivers in the state. The Florida Nonprofit Alliance is a solid source of this type of data throughout the state. And they also make policy recommendations aimed at supporting the importance of nonprofits to the residents of our state. So the nonprofit sector in Florida employs more people than the manufacturing sector. And as you might expect, the pay is not quite there. The average salary in the nonprofit sector is $60,000 a year. The state average across all sectors is $63,000. The manufacturing sector, which has equally intelligent and driven people as the nonprofit sector, they're around $73,000 So you can see that we're working for, as a sector, below even the average. The demands on nonprofits in Pinellas are high, particularly due to poverty in our county. 36% of households are what defined as the mayor mentioned Alice households, folks that are paycheck to paycheck and are one sort of bump in the road away from kind of disaster. And they're struggling to cover the basic necessities. And that's higher than the state average of 30%. And Pinellas County has slightly more poor families than Hillsborough and Pinellas. Many of you experience the impact of this in every day as you work to support the needs of your neighbors for food, shelter, childcare, medical care, and transportation. In addition to the basic needs, we all need access to culture, art, education, and things like connection to nature, animals, and a healthy environment, things that enrich life and make our part of the world a better place to be. So what we hope to gain from this exercise is data to inform a variety of action items to strengthen the nonprofit sector, including influencing public opinion, attracting private, philanthropic, and public funds and resources, attracting talent to the sector, and advancing policies that support the nonprofit sector as an economic and socially powerful industry group, which we are. We are a very powerful industry group in the state. While many of us are fully persuaded that the nonprofit space is worth being in, because we're in it, we can do a better job of advocating for ourselves in the court of public opinion, legislature, and with donors and funders. And with that being said, how do we get this data? Well, we want to make sure we got it right, that it was followed all the best practices, and with that, we enlisted the help of Phil Trocchia from the USF Muma College of Business. Come up, Phil, and tell us how we did it.
Thank you, Joe. So, did a number of people here take the nonprofit assessment survey? Yes, I'm seeing some nodding of heads. Yeah, all right, thank you. Thank you for doing that. It was a long survey, so we appreciate that. And if you didn't take it, we appreciate you being here. So I am the director of the Customer Experience Lab at University of South Florida. I work right here in St. Petersburg at Lynn Pippinger Hall, which is on 8th Street South and or 8th Avenue South and 4th Street in St. Pete. The survey was inspired by the 2018 nonprofit survey and scan that was conducted by Foundation for Healthy St. Petersburg and the Nonprofit Leadership Center. The survey was further refined by leadership and staff at the Pinellas Community Foundation, the St. Petersburg Foundation, and me. The survey was expanded from the original, and it asked questions regarding COVID and funding restrictions and many other questions, so it was expanded from the original survey. The survey was distributed electronically through email links obtained through contacts from the Pinellas Community Foundation, St. Petersburg Foundation, and Giant Partners, which is a California-based provider of email distribution lists. We sent out 1,000 surveys, and 161 people responded. Some of you are right here. So our survey response rate was 16%. And that's actually quite good. If you look at consumer surveys, we're talking maybe 3 or 4%. And if you look at business-to-business surveys, it's around 10 to 12%. So I was very happy with a 16% response rate. And that's actually really good given that of all the people who took the survey, no one was paid anything. And right up front, everybody got an email that said, this will take you 20 or 25 minutes to take it. So that's a big time commitment. So we appreciate you taking the survey. The survey went out between October of 2022 and April of 2023, and the median test taking time was just over 20 minutes. The survey was distributed on Qualtrics, which is an electronic survey construction and distribution platform. Some of you probably use Qualtrics. And Qualtrics, I'm very excited about this. Qualtrics comes up with quality scores, and by their criterion, the quality score for this survey was 100%. So they look at things like ambiguous text on open-ended questions. So we asked you open-ended questions like, what keeps you up at night? Nobody gave strange answers. Everybody's answers were coherent, and Qualtrics looks at that. They look at straight lining, which means you know people who answer 4, 4, 4, 4, 4. Nobody did that. You looked at each individual question and you paid attention to the survey that we worked so hard on, so appreciate that. And they look at speeders too, people who just sort of go by it very quickly. So really appreciate the quality of responses that you provided. Then I analyzed the results in SPSS, which is a statistical software package owned by IBM. And analysis methods include measures of central tendency, like the mean, the median, and mode that you all know from your old stats classes, and frequency distributions. And I also looked at bivariate tests, which looks at 2 variables at a time. So some bivariate tests would be things like the size of the nonprofit and the sector of the nonprofit, if it was a religious or educational or health-oriented nonprofit, and things like funding concerns, fundraising concerns, staffing concerns, the financial health of the nonprofit. So we looked at 2 variables at a time. So with that, I can say that the quality, I'll give it my stamp of approval, the quality of the responses was very high. So with that, I'll give it back to Joe.
I sum that up as just knowing that you are statistically significant to us. So, nerd joke, I had to do it. My papers got a little befuddled before. I did want to give Phil his proper introduction because I missed it. So he's a professor of marketing at USF's Muma College of Business in St. Pete, engages students in real-life marketing challenges that assist local business owners. He's been doing that since 2009, and his students have worked with approximately 60 nonprofits and private sector companies. And Trokia believes that civic engagement aspect of his courses are his most valuable teaching tool. All right, Duggan, you ready to rock? Here he is, Duggan Cooley.
All right, so now we're going to start diving into the meat of the information we obtained from the assessment. And I'm going to talk now about mission, board of directors, demographics. But before I do that, I want to let everybody know that the total content of the assessment is over 100 pages of information. Today we're covering highlights from the assessment that I think are of interest to all of us, but we encourage you to use the QR code and get into the survey, dive into the data, all of it. And then this morning, feel free to jot down notes as we go along. There will be plenty of time for Q&A. We have built that in today, and we're going to go over a lot of information at one time. So feel free to jot down notes and then participate in our Q&A. So looking first at mission, board of directors, and demographics, wanting to summarize the findings at a high level. And to summarize at a high level, the news is good. We have in our community serious, viable organizations that follow practices, procedures, and have the mission focus that we expect in well-run organizations in this sector. In our community, 94% state that staff are strongly mission aligned, and about 3/4 of surveyed organizations claim that their boards are as well. More than 90% agree that their organization has a strong statement of values, and the majority say that their staff and their boards share those values. This is exactly what we want to see in this sector. We are mission and values driven. About 3/4 of the organizations measure the demographics of the populations that they serve, and they have told us that their staff reflects the demographic composition of clients or the communities that they serve. But interestingly, in open-ended questions, we did hear from smaller organizations that found it more difficult to mirror community demographics on their staff, and that might be an issue that we want to delve into more and learn more about over time. We asked questions about how things have changed because of COVID, and about 66% of organizations indicated that COVID changed the way that they work with their boards. 71% of organizations, like the rest of the world, cited the introduction of Zoom and virtual meetings as something that they adopted and have now as an ongoing process and practice. Offering hybrid options, some respondents said it enabled them to increase participation and to diversify the makeup of their boards, which is interesting. Looking at other governance and management practices, they are strong as well. 90% of organizations have current written job descriptions for their staff. 79% of them perform annual staff reviews, and over half of the organizations have formal board self-evaluations. That is a fantastic practice to have boards evaluate their work, to make sure that they're aligned with the mission, the values, that the work they're doing as a board is aligned with what the staff is trying to accomplish. It is fantastic to have formal board self-evaluation. Looking at boards, there are two statistics that tell us a little bit more about the health of boards of directors in our community, our nonprofit boards of directors. One of them is after boards evaluate their own work, they work to make needed changes. So 93% said that they do that, and so if they are working with their board to evaluate what's going on, then they act to make changes accordingly. That is fantastic. Another statistic about the health of our boards is that when asked, can I count on my board members to deliver when I need it, the vast majority of organizations said they can. That is incredible to know that our nonprofit leadership, organizational leadership, staff leadership can count on their boards when they need their help. Looking at business practices is another thing that we examined, and we all often ask, and I think from a funder perspective, we want to know about conflicts of interest, and we see across the board that we have solid business practices and well-run businesses in this sector. The strong majority of organizations have conflict of interest policies, board term limits that are respected, and the vast majority can transparently produce financial documents and a host of regulatory and performance documentation. They can either give it to you or they put it on their website already, but they are able to make that available. So they are open, truthful, transparent about what is going on inside their organizations. It is fantastic to see that. So let's talk about who participated in the survey. And I think it's wonderful to see a diversity of size of organizations that participated in this survey. It is very much diversified across the sizes of organizations, and we look at and benchmark those that are under 250,000 and other benchmarks as we go along. But it was wonderful to see that it's pretty equally divided among small, medium, and large organizations, and the organizations represented in the report are nicely distributed by size. There was fantastic participation across the board. And so also wanted to look at where did survey responses come from? And they come from where we expect them to come from, which is nice validation of this effort. The distribution of the headquarters of organizations comes from first our population centers, starting in St. Petersburg, Clearwater, and then Largo. And then after that, a scattering of organizations that are elsewhere throughout the community. And that is what we would have expected to happen. So it's nice to see that when borne out in the data. So to talk about growth, capacity, and fundraising, another section of the survey will be Karen Chasen, and she's been a great partner to work with, and she's kept us rolling along. So she's going to now talk to you about growth, capacity, and fundraising. Karen.
Good morning, everybody. It's great to be back in this space, isn't it? Okay, so the more than 20 questions in this section of the survey address questions of organizational sustainability and financial and fundraising capacity. Nearly 71% of the organizations surveyed feel positive that their organizations will grow in the next 3 years. 16% anticipate remaining the same. Less than 5% believe that they will shrink or close shop over the next 3 years. And larger organizations with their reserves are more optimistic than smaller ones, not surprisingly. This optimism reflects the tone of the responses of the survey overall, but the organization leaders also commented in open-ended questions that they have no choice but to grow. The needs in our community are growing exponentially, and so they expect to, hope to, and essentially must. Leaders surveyed also indicated that they adapted well to the unprecedented circumstances of the COVID-19 pandemic. 89% of those surveyed strongly agreed or somewhat agreed that their organizations adapted well to the demands of COVID. This section of the survey also included one of the most detailed open-ended questions, what keeps you up at night, and speaking figuratively, we hope. The most frequent responses could be grouped into 3 categories. People issues, 75% cited these, broader financial concerns, 35%, and concerns about engaging with and serving their communities, that's more than a third. People issues most frequently cited were hiring and retaining committed, skilled staff, volunteers, and board members, right-sizing the staff to meet community needs, rebuilding morale and engagement after COVID. Succession planning came up frequently, and we would have loved to have done a follow-up on that, and perhaps that's something to look at more closely in the future. We're not exactly sure what people were referring to there. And then there was that frustration with board members who micromanage or don't understand their proper role. Financial concerns included inflation, lack of affordable housing for staff as well as clients, economic stress on client families in poverty, high cost of warehouse and office space, need to diversify funding sources, the strain of working under reimbursement contracts, particularly when reimbursement is slow, membership and volunteer declines post-COVID, insufficient funding for operations. One category of financial worries were funder-related, and we're going to address those at the end of the presentation in section 4, which is funder and donor relations. Service and engagement concerns included increases in the community need for service, need to better message and market to prospective clients as well as donors, the impact of the political environment on their ability to serve, something we might want to dig deeper on, understanding and addressing COVID-related changes to the social dynamics and behavior of members, clients, and donors. In other words, how COVID has sort of changed us all in various ways. More on fundraising. The top 3 funding sources for Pinellas nonprofits are government, local, state, and national, individual donations, private donors and funders, and corporate support and fundraising events were number 4 and 5. The top 3 were consistent with the top 3 funding sources for nonprofits nationally, so we're in line with the national trends. When asked if they'd met their fundraising goals over the past 3 years, more than 48% said yes, more than 46% said no. More than half of those surveys felt that they could not attract donations of $5K or above on an annual basis. Additionally, collaboration is an important aspect of nonprofit capacity. 64% said that they collaborate successfully with other nonprofits and government. 33% say their collaborations have had mixed results. And with respect to evaluation practices, 76.5% of organizations gather data on client satisfaction. 65% have a formal evaluation process for gauging the effectiveness of their services. And now, Duggan, talent and compensation.
So let's talk a little bit about talent and compensation at our nonprofits. I think we know a little bit about the compensation story already. Joe did a nice job comparing us to the manufacturing sector. But let's talk about sort of the makeup of our organizations. 81% of those surveyed have paid staff, and that's either part-time or full-time paid staff. So we do have people working inside our nonprofits. That makes sense. Many of our organizations, they don't happen without human beings. Volunteers are great, but then for many of us, it is required that we have paid staff. We couldn't get everything done that we need to if we didn't have paid staff. Not in this survey, or not in our highlights today, but I did want to highlight a piece of information that's in the data. It is impressive to see the diversity of skills among board and staff. That was asked, and it's a pretty compact slide that has a bunch of information on it about the talent among staff and among board, but it is an impressive lineup to see that expertise that is available to our community as a whole. So looking a little bit more about our compensation, about 11% of organizations said that they pay a competitive salary. About 12% offer medical benefits. One thing that was a little contradictory for us, and I think that we need to examine a little further, is that while 11% of respondents said that they believe that we pay a competitive salary, 50% of them said they are still able to attract and retain talent. That may be because people are mission-driven and move to the sector because they're mission-driven. There could be other things at play. But the issue of competitive pay, we really need to tease that out. We know that salaries in this sector are lower than in other industries, but interestingly enough, the sector is still able to draw people to mission-driven, cause-related organizations. And as we work to grow the nonprofit talent pool in our community, it would be great to better understand what it is that draws people to work in this sector. So in response to open-ended questions, many expressed concerns about their ability to compete for and to compensate skilled staff, particularly grant writers and fundraisers. And throughout the data in the assessment, you will see quotes from nonprofits. Some of the open-ended responses are from interviews from a diversity of sizes of organizations. And this quote is one of them, expressing the challenge for grant writers and other really skilled people and the pressure that puts on organizations to be competitive in what they offer. So let's talk about training. I think it's great to know that we have learning organizations in our community. 63% of organizations have a budget line item for training. That is fantastic. We need to grow that a little more, I think, but at the same time, it is wonderful to know that a strong majority of organizations put money toward training. Let's talk about fundraising expertise. Only 40% of organizations report having fundraising expertise on their staff or their board. This is an area that we need to work on. It mirrors some of the other statistics that we see in the assessment about the ability to attract and retain donors and gifts over $5,000. Perhaps this is an area we need to work on things in terms of sector-wide training. We know from our work with Pinellas nonprofits that there is a revolving door in fundraising talent moving around the industry, and that has been present for quite a while. To strengthen our sector, we should take action to work on growing the overall pool in fundraising and grant writing talent that we have in this community. I think many of our organizations would probably agree that we need to work on that. How do we get more money in? So when questioned about turnover because of the COVID-19 pandemic, more than 57% of organizations said that they experienced a lot of it. But we didn't ask a follow-up to this, and it could be an area for study. Finding out, was it burnout? Was it competitive pressure? Did staff move to other nonprofits? Or did they move to other industries? And this is something I think in future assessments we can dive into, but I did just want to ask even briefly, by a show of hands, if the people here have commentary for us. Do you think it's burnout? Anyone think it's burnout? Did people leave the industry? That's really my question. Did they leave nonprofit industry or did they go to other nonprofits? Do you think they left the industry? Some of them have left the industry. I think we really need to dig into that more and look at the data as to where people are going. And also, how does this match up with this? We're still able to attract people to the sector, but then are we losing people to other industries? There's a lot of brilliant talent in the nonprofit sector, and I could see how we are at risk of losing that to other industries. So that is certainly an area to look at. So that wraps up our looking at just some of the data around talent and compensation. Karen's going to talk a little bit more about donor and funder relations, and I just wanted to preface this. There was an intentional effort to make sure we honor the anonymity of the survey, and Karen will talk a little bit more about that. But as a funder, as Pinellas Community Foundation, I think it's important to hear the critical information that sometimes comes from the community, the work that we can do better as a funder. I hope other funders are listening as well and pay attention to this data. We have a lot of honest feedback from organizations about what it's like to work with funders, and Karen will go over some of that, and the survey has even more data. But from our perspective at Pinellas Community Foundation, we are listening and we are learning, and so it is important that you continue to give honest feedback. So with that, Karen is going to talk about our donor and funder relations.
So, managing relationships with donors and funders is critical to the health of any nonprofit. This section, and it's the fourth and final section, and then we'll be doing Q&A, asks some routine as well as some challenging questions about these relationships and the policies and practices that support them. In contrast to some of the really strong practices that Duggan outlined in the initial section of the survey report, there's a little bit of work to do in this area. Less than half of the organizations report having written policies about donor recognition and retention, 41%. Over 40% of the organizations have donor retention rates of 70% or better. That's actually not bad, given that the national retention rate is closer to 40-50. But we know that hanging on to donors that you already have is way more cost-effective and relationship conducive than constantly searching for new donors. One of the reasons why we made this survey completely confidential, and lots of times in surveys, that's not the case. It's easy to go in and really figure out who answered what to what. This was completely blind. In fact, that's one reason why it took a little longer to collect the data. We weren't able to incentivize people or even know who had responded or who had not. But we wanted to, we wanted to ask some very direct questions about what people felt that funders could do differently or better. The power differential between those who are making funding decisions and those who are seeking funding is unequivocal. It's a reality. So we understand the need for anonymity. In addition to the survey, we also conducted around 15 in-depth interviews with nonprofit leaders, and we are protecting their privacy as well. A significant stumbling block in the funder-grantee relationship relates to competition for talent. And this comment sort of was a little bit hard to hear as somebody who's been on this side of that side of the table. Another commenter said, often funders create a very competitive environment for funding, then penalize nonprofits when they compete rather than collaborate. When asked about challenging grant performance or reporting requirements, 38% of the organizations said that 50% or more of their grants had requirements that they would call onerous. Yet the majority of organizations said that these requirements did not deter them for applying for grants. Perhaps that's just a requirement, but that was sort of a sobering data point. A related question we asked was about trust-based philanthropy, which we defined this way. Movement to reduce the power differential between funders and nonprofits with strategies including less rigid requirements and more multi-year unrestricted grants. This is a small minority of nonprofits report that a significant proportion of their funding relationships are trust-based philanthropy. Here's some summarizing takeaways from the comments on funder relations. And let me add that in the report, which is more than 100 pages, there are lots of individual personal comments. You can dig into the data and really read yourselves what people said. And again, just a reminder, these are just highlights that we're presenting today. One takeaway is that with government being the most significant funder for nonprofits in Pinellas, more attention might be paid to advocacy and communicating with government funders. As we learned during COVID and CARES funding, and Duggan can really speak to this, government can listen, and they do listen, and they're capable of relaxing their requirements in sensible ways. The power differential between funders and nonprofit applicants for funding is real, but both sides need each other, so communicate. We need to grow the nonprofit talent pool and increase career opportunities in the sector to avoid a revolving door competition for key staff positions. And that concludes our formal presentation of the survey.
Thank you, everyone. And just to reiterate, please go and read the whole survey. For us to go through it all we'd be here for maybe a day or two, and we'd have to get twice as much bacon and eggs, and we just weren't there. So come on up, folks. So let's have a bit of a discussion. Does anybody have anything that stood out or questions that were inspired or thoughts based on the data presented, or whatever else you want to talk about? Oh, do we have, sorry, we should have some mics. We have, looks like a hand up over here. She's on her way.
Yes. Did you have someone?
Yeah, I did.
Hi, Joanne Leiter, CEO of Preserve Vision Florida. Thank you very much, number one, for presenting this. Very impactful. You mentioned delving more into the pay issue. A question I would suggest to you is the impact of the living wage. Because it not only post-COVID did we see some movement around within the sector, the competition for what we all heard of fast food restaurants now are in competition with nonprofits, if you will. And then, so the question is the impact of the living wage, and also, are we as a sector really trying to assess the meaningfulness of employment with us versus employment within another industry? And a subset of that is, I was kind of shocked at the low percentage offering medical coverage. I know we are not able to offer that in our small agency, but I have watched this decline over the years, but I was pretty shocked at that in terms of, wow, we've now gotten to under 20% of agencies offering that, of the survey respondents. Thank you again for doing this.
Well, those are fantastic questions, and in a follow-up, those are things that we certainly can consider. I don't know, I don't think we teased out in the survey when asking about medical benefits. I'm wondering also how many might offer stipends for that and have people buy insurance on the exchange. I think the question was probably just, do you offer medical benefits, and it's a yes or no, and people might think about that a little differently, so it might be interesting to see the impact of that as well.
And one of the perspectives that brought forth for me were the size of the organization. We talk about right size staffing. There's always going to be more need than we can serve, is what it feels like. And so the tendency is to try to stretch to fill as much as that need and put that need first, which means people doing more work, getting more people, which stretches other areas of the budget, which means we can't offer those types of benefits. And so I think a good thought exercise is to really say, maybe we're a stronger organization if we shrink. And we can, if we have one less person, and then we can offer everybody benefits with that salary, are we actually a net, is our impact net positive if we make that decision? Sometimes we just end up with more, and what it costs us ends up costing us more in impact than actually getting smaller.
Hi, Lisa Pineda, Sustainable Urban Agriculture Coalition. I wanted to ask about one particular slide. It had, you said that there was a varied response rate, and the lowest was 250,000 and below. I would venture to say that we are a 100% non-volunteer organization. A lot of us in here are. We have zero for our pay. I think it needs to be very much teased out, because when I did speak about this, because I was at the first one, and I asked other small nonprofits if they responded, they didn't even know what I was talking about. So I think a lot of us small organizations that statistically we actually have a greater impact than the larger ones, we weren't even included in this. So I don't know how that would be kind of addressed, that maybe making sure that there is I think there's 10 people on our board and we're all not paid, and we service thousands of people a year, but we weren't included in the survey. Somehow we got missed.
And I think
do you have that? Sorry, the percentage. You said you showed the different rates, but you didn't say what percentage respondents but I didn't know if you had that information, or also if you knew the lower end of the zero rather than 250. I can't even imagine $250,000 for organization, but like if you had it like broken down smaller besides 250.
And I think we have that information, but just for the sense of category, because the survey was open to anyone who received the link, and that was published to organizations of all different sizes, all different budgets, volunteer run, not volunteer run, and so many, I think, of our smaller under that threshold were included in the opportunity to respond, but I think we used that, and we can look at the data, but we used that number just for benchmarking who participated, but the survey was open. And so I think we've got responses from all different size organizations, even below that threshold, because it was available, but certainly worthy of teasing out. And I think that that's one of the great things about the survey this time around is the ability to kind of categorize, and we can look at needs and issues. You can shrink that in the survey data and look, are organizations of this size having XYZ challenge or need, or are they doing better than their counterparts that might be a different size? So being able to get that differentiating data now, this time the way the survey was run, I think will be helpful to us in the long run.
Bill, would you like to come up since some of these questions relate to what we can and can't go back to in terms of the data set? And we can share, Mike.
Sure, thank you for the question. So we sent out the survey. It was people who were affiliated with St. Petersburg Foundation and Pinellas Community Foundation, as well as Giant Partners, which was a California-based distribution company. So if anybody was missed, I'm sorry for that, but we tried our best to get every single nonprofit in Pinellas County. That's absolutely what I wanted. And then in terms of the numbers in revenue, we broke them down into 4 categories just for expository purposes, just to show that there were about 25% in each. But if you had a nonprofit that made almost nothing, you were absolutely welcome to be included in it as well. And we have, in the survey, these were just broken down for the purposes of presentation. But in the survey itself, I think we went down below 25,000 as one of the options. So if there were nonprofits who weren't included, I do apologize for that, but we really tried our very best to get every single nonprofit included in the survey.
I'm going to just add one thing. Lisa, thanks for that question. I think if this is something that we as a community want to do, want to find the resources for and continue doing every 5 years, I think it would be great to have advisory groups of nonprofits of different sizes to sort of help us ask better questions. I think we did a better job this time than in 2018, and I can say that without pointing any fingers because I was involved in it that time and this time. So I think it's a process of continuous improvement, but hearing from more nonprofits about what you want to know about folks sort of at your particular size and scope would be, I think, a smart thing to do.
And just to make sure we answered specifically, you asked the percentage. It was around 25% for each of them, which Phil mentioned. Just want to echo that. And then the one section was 0 to 250, so zeros were there.
Good morning. Eric Smith, Inclusivity. I want to say thank you first and foremost for doing this and giving us the information that we need. But I did have a question around the demographic information. Was it teased out BIPOC-led organizations compared to non-BIPOC-led organizations? Additionally, was any of the comments or information help us understand like how different communities are viewing the same questions? Because I think when the information from a demographic standpoint is dissected, you may find there's a bit of a difference.
Sorry, Eric, I missed the beginning of it.
BIPOC-led organizations compared to non-BIPOC-led organizations, 1, and 2, was any of the other information parsed out by demographics? So to better understand, are certain groups of people answering the same question the same way? Because the data is kind of aggregated, so it doesn't really give it a clear depiction based upon this on if that information has been parsed out a bit.
Okay, I have a little bit of a hearing issue. I think, Eric, I caught at least one important part of what you said, and I'll let my colleagues fill in if I've missed other pieces of it. We asked the question of whether boards and staffs were aligned demographically with the communities they serve. We did not specifically ask about the leadership, ethnicity, or race of leaders. Couple reasons for that, and we could revisit this next time around. Foundations and funders collect that data pretty comprehensively at present. B, because we've prioritized anonymity, when you self-identify in some additional ways, it could become not difficult to figure out who was filling in the survey based on what we know of the nonprofit community and its leadership. So that was a choice that was made this time around.
Yeah, when we put the survey out, we specifically asked for one person at the leadership level in the organization to fill it out, ideally the ED or the leader, president, CEO, however they're titled. So that's where the anonymity would really take a hit.
So I just wanted just a quick follow-up. I think it's going to be helpful for you all to kind of tease that out a little bit more, because as someone who's in this work from a diversity, equity, and inclusion perspective, that gets teased out all the time.
And I think part of that can come too from funders and finding a way for funders to share that information. Many of us collect that information on our funding applications or as a part of our funding applications, and wanting to know the makeup of boards, board leadership, staff leadership, but using some of that information there as well to continue to build the picture that could supplement what has come out of the survey as well. It's a valid, very valid question, and I think something to work on.
Hello, I'm Rhonda Hilisu. I'm an independent contractor, a nonprofit advisor, and grant writer. And one of the things that I do and I'm advocating for is going back to the staffing issue, is everybody gets into a crunch time. And when you have that crunch time, do you have temporary contractors to draw from? So one of the things that I've been working with, one organization, is to encourage that. Have a bank of qualified people in the categories that you need in staff so that you can fill in with somebody who has already somewhat aligned with your organization. That goes with an advisory board too. So you have people that you can draw on, paid or unpaid.
Yeah, one of the things, kind of golden rules in the for-profit world when I had an agency was we always staffed full-time to the second slowest month of the year. And then anything above that, we use variable labor. Because if the optimal staffing is 100% utilization of your full-time employees, and then as you get beyond people that you need, you start to get them at 50% utilization, 70% utilization, and that's wasted resources. And so that's where variable labor is your friend. Specifically with skills, a lot of times you have might be a designer or somebody that you use some of the time, but you don't use all the time, and that's another place for an independent contractor or a freelancer or somebody that you can bring in as needed and pay for exactly the work you need. Helps keep the budget healthier.
I think as a follow-up to that, we just had a little bit of conversation even earlier this week about finding better ways to maybe catalog some of that information and people who are available to do those kind of things that are trusted, because sometimes, by referral is great, but then how do we create an opportunity to make sure that we have a list that might be accessible of those who are trusted to do a lot of this work or that our nonprofits already trust. We get a lot of solicitations at the foundation from people who want to do work with nonprofits, and some of them have the credentials, some of them don't. And I think it's worthwhile trying to figure out how we catalog that.